Okay, recording. All right, now we'll share the screen. Thanks for bearing with me, everybody. Okay, so can I get a reader? Anybody willing to do this? Just awesome. Thanks, Philip. Start with the let's just start from the beginning and read 4 paragraphs.
Great. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Thank you. Let us make, as it were, a fresh start and say again what and what sort of thing substance should be said to be. For perhaps from this, we may also make clear that substance, whatever it is, that is separated from the perceptible substances. Since then, the substance is some sort of starting point and cause, let us pursue it from there. The why is always inquired into in this way. Quite as one thing belonged to a certain other. For to inquire into why the musical human is a musical human is either, as we just said, to inquire into why the human is musical or why it is the other. But to inquire into why a thing is itself is to inquire into nothing. For that something is the case and that it exists, that should already be clear. I mean, for example, that the moon is eclipsed, but that a thing is itself, of that there is one account and one cause in all cases, as in why the human is human or the musical is musical. Unless someone were to say that it is because each thing is indivisible from itself, and this is what it is for it to be one. But that, at any rate, is common to all cases and too concise. We can, though, inquire into why the human is an animal of such and such a sort. It is clear, accordingly, that this is not to inquire into why that thing, which is a human, is a human. It is when something is predicated of something, then, that we inquire into why it belongs to that thing. But that it does belong must be clear, since if things are not that way, there's nothing to inquire into. For example, why does it thunder? Why is there noise in the clouds? For this way, what we are inquiring into is one thing predicated of another. And why are these, for example, brick and stones, a house? It is evident, accordingly, that we are inquiring into the cause. This is the essence, logical linguistically, one might also say. But in some cases, it is what the thing is for the sake of. For example, it is presumably this in the case of a house or a bed. And in some, it is what first initiated the movement, since this is also a cause. But the latter is inquired into in cases of something's coming to be and passing away, whereas the former is inquired into also in the case of a thing's being. What we are inquiring into most easily escapes notice, however, in cases where one thing is not said of another, for example, human. When we are inquiring into what it is, it escapes notice because it is said simply, and we do not distinguish that these things are this. But we must divide up before inquiring. Otherwise, inquiring into nothing and inquiring into something will become joint inquiries. But since the existence of the subject and also the belonging of the predicate to it must be the case, it is clear accordingly that what we are inquiring into is why the matter is something. For example, why are these things a house? Because the being for house belongs to them. Why is this, or rather this body in this state, human? So what is being looked for is the cause in virtue of which the matter is something. And this is the substance. It is evident accordingly that in the case of things said simply, there is neither inquiry nor teaching, but instead another way that inquiry belongs to them.
Awesome, thank you. All right. Let's take some thoughts here. What he goes for a fresh start. We've been struggling mightily with oh, one second, I gotta close my door, with Metaphysics Z. All right. So let's just, what have you noticed about the way he's changed or he's altered his view here? Is he doing something different? Is he doing something similar? What do you see going on in at least the first two of these paragraphs? What struck you?
Well, it seems to be he's introduced cause as sort of salient to substance or germane to substance. So, and it says in that first paragraph, since then the substance is some sort of starting point and cause. And then in the last paragraph that Philip read, it says, so what at the very end, so what is being looked for is the cause in virtue of which the matter is something, and this is the substance.
Right.
So I don't think he's brought up cause previously in his descriptions of substance, or at least not emphasized it.
Okay, good. So that's first, yeah, and I'm not quite sure that, well, yeah. When he says cause, right, I think it's good to keep in mind, obviously, I think everybody knows he's not talking about like something moving and bumping into anything else. So not like an efficient cause, but what he is thinking about is all the time, and when he turns to book 8 is what makes the composite, right? The composite thing, this horse, what makes it one? What is the cause of its unity? Right. And so is it the matter? Is it the form? Is it something external? Right? Like the genus or a Platonic idea, something that's not in the composite, but other than, right? So that's what he's inquiring into, right? What is that? The whole time he's been looking at, actually, I've got a little screen share here that might make some sense of this. Does everybody see that?
Nope.
All right. Fucking hell, this whole screen share thing is going to be the death of me. Okay, sorry. So if we, oops. All right, now, everybody see that goofy looking thing, my writing?
Yep.
All right. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because it's all very familiar to us, but it is, it'll probably bring back a little bit of book 7 to you, right? We're trying to understand what makes this horse substance, right? It was our very first, or this human being substance. That was our very first example given. And in book Zeta, he sharpens his focus for looking at primary being or primary ousia, because that is the most one, right? And then he gives us 4 different candidates: substrate, essence, the universal, and the genus. And my little parentheses there indicate that with the substrate, the universal, and the genus, these seem to be one, but are really many. And the essence seems to be many, right? The problems with the definition, but is really one. And so a lot of what we've been doing is over on the left side underneath substrate. We've been thinking about things that are capable of motion. And as we know, in order to think something as capable of motion, we need to think it through the principles of matter and form. And matter and form thought together gives you the principle of the composite, right? And so I'm really just invoking this funky diagram to do two things. First of all, to show that the kind of cause we're looking at is what makes, the kind of cause we're looking at here at the end of 17 and into book 8 is what makes the composite one. And we began over on the left side. We just considered matter all by itself. And that didn't lead anywhere. And then we looked at form all by itself. And that led us to our second main notion of ousia, essence, right? And then I think the only thing I really need to mention is that there is a point here down at number 4, essence is identified with the formal substrate. So in his development of essence, he hooks up this, right, with this formal substrate there. He shows that the universal and the genus, they're one over many, but they're common to many. And so they have a pluralistic structure that is not what he's looking for. What makes this horse is not hoarseness and animalness and being shaped and being grass eating and being alive and being all these different forms that it could be conceived of as participating in. Right? We lose the horse in this horse in all of these different, so to speak, Platonic ideas. So the promising path was starting to look at, how do we think this essence? When we think essence, we don't see essence. We understand a unity, and that unity comes across in our definitions. And so, in a sense, essence is closer to us, right? Not closer to nature, but closer to us in the definitions. So we work through those. And okay, I'm going to stop sharing this. So the point being that we are always, we're looking at composites as being made up of parts, as being made up of, or as being only thinkable through a multiplicity of principles. And through all of this, the question of substances is yes, but what makes that one? And the word make is, it's just another word for cause. What causes them to be one? And we know it's got to have something to do with the form. And right. And so book 8 is going to look at a little bit more closely, what is it about the form? Or how are we to understand form in order to understand it to be the cause of the unity of the thing, especially since it seems like that the composite is made up of matter and form, right? It seems like the very presence of form seems to prevent it from being a unity. Okay, Tyler, I see your hand.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think we have kind of two senses of being. So a horse can be being two-eyed and four-limbed, let's say, but the being together of being two-eyed and four-limbed can't be accounted for by simply aggregating those two ways of being. So there's a derivative sense of being that requires the substance that it is being that kind of way that unifies these different kinds of being. And change wouldn't be possible on the account of just these kind of static categories of ways something can be. You need the substance that is being that way.
Right. That's a nicely put, and it also suggests why Aristotle keeps coming back to this concept of matter as the underlying subject, the substrate. The substrate somehow has to be substance, right? Because it's that which endures through change, and change is losing form and gaining form. So we always say of the horse, it lost its paleness and gained its grayness. And so we're always attributing forms, universals, to the substrate. So it seems like matter has to be the substrate. And we look at matter just all by itself, right? The first thing we discover is that if you take away all the qualities, all the quantities, and just get at everything that we could predicate of it, and just tear them all away, right? We get nothing at all. So matter turns out to be, on this view, as that which is left over after you've taken all the formal determination away from it. Right. Then it's nothing. It can't be the substance of it. But what's interesting is going to return back to this concept of matter and get at it a different way, so that it's not and not ever merely absent or empty of all determination.
But because matter doesn't have, it's utterly indeterminate. It can't be this one thing because there's no essence. I mean, you've taken any essential aspect of it out if you just consider the matter by itself.
Right.
Democritus went down that problem, had that problem, right?
I don't know. Did he?
Well, he was talking about that somewhere in our reading, or maybe.
Right. Yeah, I didn't read that part very specifically because I didn't want to go down the Democritus path. But when we get there, put your finger on it. All right. So the first thing that he does is he points out what we've been talking about in a way all the time, right? Predication, right? Why does one thing belong to a certain other, right? The why is always inquired into in this way. Why does he say that? Why is he interested in the why?
Well, because that's the problem. We have multiple things, and why are they together? Why is the oneness of, where's the oneness?
Right. Remember what he says about the why, what he says about the why in the posterior analytics?
Well, that's the opposite of the what. There's the why.
Right. We only know something if we know the why. And knowing the why is knowing the cause. Right. And so once we start talking about the why, right, to Tim's point, we're automatically talking about the cause.
And there is no why for simple things.
Yes. Okay. Yes. That's very interesting. That's not something he's talked about very much here, right?
He brushed up against it here, but he does also talk about it in other places. But yeah,
right. But it's always very, it's always just a hint. Okay, and he suggests, what the problem is, but to inquire into a thing, into why a thing is itself, is to inquire into nothing. For that something is the case and that it exists, that should already be clear, right? So we have this situation. I'm not sure if we've mentioned it very much, but right. The whole inquiry is based on the idea that things have properties, and that is mirrored in our assertions, which are predications of a subject, right? So things, properties, kind of the ontic side, and subject predicate on the linguistic side. These are just two sides of the exact same coin, and we can investigate assertion through looking at things and properties. We can investigate things and properties by looking at assertions with the subject predicate structure, and that's what he was doing all the way through Zeta. And now he's saying, but what we're trying to get at is, this S that we say is a P is something. But to say, for instance, our S is this horse. To say that this horse is empty, right? And to say anything that's other than it, of it, for instance, this horse is pale, this horse is running, this horse is feeding, right? Is precisely not to get clear about what that thing is. So this is really the first time that I can recall where Aristotle's, trying to think, how is it that we think the subject of a predication without accidentally either saying nothing, just repeating the name of the thing, this horse is this horse, or going astray and saying something other than it, like it's feeding or it's pale, when what we want to say is what it is to be that, right? And so our handrail thus far has been predication, saying something of something. And this is, in a sense, what Aristotle has to either modify or transcend in some way in order to get at what he's been narrowing his focus down into in terms of, what is a substance? It's essence. It's essence as form, and its essence as form as the ultimate differentia of a genus. And how do we say that? Seems like partly what he's turning to here. I saw a hand. Whoever had a hand up, let me see. I thought Tyler and then Mitra. Oh,
Yeah,
sorry. Tyler, Peter, then Mitra.
So I think why here is a very specific kind of why, because you can give an account of things coming together as if they're one when they're separable. He's interested in what's not separable. So you could have the account of the human becoming musical because he went to music school. But of course, the human isn't necessarily musical in that exact sense.
Mm-hmm.
But the capacity to become musical may, in fact, belong to the what it is to be a human. So it's different than exploring what I would call the conditions for two things coming together as well. So because things came together in certain circumstances doesn't mean that's why they are one.
Right. Awesome. Peter?
Yeah. This whole, you asked about posterior analytics earlier, and what is the why question?
Yeah.
And I started reading this in Joe Sachs's translation. He only has 10% of the footnotes, or even 5% of the footnotes that Mr. Reeves has, because we're only on footnote 43 in the Sachs, and we're up to 800 and something here. Anyway, but they're much punchier ones. And here he says, for chapter 17, right here in this paragraph, in posterior analytics, Aristotle says that all questions fall into 4 kinds. What is the case? Why? Whether something exists, and what something is. He argues that they all go back to the why as a search for a middle term through which one thing belongs to another.
Right.
And so that's, and I think, and now this is where I'm getting off on Peter's thought here, is that, so that middle term is the sum one, is the unified thing, of which form and matter are the middle terms in some sense of the structure of substance.
Oh, interesting. I haven't thought about it that way. That's provocative.
I would say that he makes some interesting comments on nature that I think help clarify and are in line with what Peter's saying, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Hey, Mitra, you still have your hand up? If so, please chime in.
Yeah, sorry, I joined last night, so I'm not familiar with the background, all the material that you have been discussing.
Don't worry about it.
But to me, it seems the question why, which means, as you pointed out, looking for cause. In fact, Aristotle himself talks about cause.
Yep.
And when you have a cause, there is an effect. And so he could be meaning that the cause and effect are distinct. That is the assumption. And so when you have a musical human, that is a distinct from human and from musical. And therefore, when you have a tautology like human is human, it means nothing because they're same and they're not distinct. I think that's what he's trying to say.
Right. Yeah. And but that poses a problem for him, right? Because he wants to be able to say what the S is that the P is predicated of without simply predicating more things of it and making it lose the kind of determinacy it has to have in order to gain and lose predicates without ceasing to be itself. It's got to, so that anything can gain and lose predicates without ceasing to be itself has a certain ontological robustness that he attributes to substance. And it's that metaphysical robustness that he captures in the term essence, right? Without thinking them as Platonic forms and eternal, stable, I don't know, rules. He's thinking them differently, and that's what we're honing in on, right? I'm just going to say it might be a little bit too modern, too much of an idea of efficient cause to think of every cause as implying an effect, right? As two temporally separate events. The billiard ball strikes the cue ball, and then the cue ball moves. That's the Humean thing. That's not how he thinks cause. Most cause of movement. But anyway, I just wanted to put that in brackets as that thought works sometimes, but it doesn't always work in Aristotle. Thanks. Tim, I see your hand.
Yeah, so two things going at once now. So in response to that last comment, it seems like if we were to think in terms of cause and effect in this case, we'd have to say that the effect is the thing that we're talking about, and the cause is what makes it one, makes it that thing. And so it is, yeah, it's a kind of misleading given current terminology to use cause and effect together. But I wanted to originally comment or ask a question regarding Peter's saying the quote that he read. So I think I heard you saying that the middle term were the cause and the matter, the form and the matter were the middle term, but I was thinking.
I think they were the extremes. Middle form and matter is extremes, and the unity is the middle term, right?
Okay, that makes sense to me because I thought he was saying the opposite, which seemed to.
I want to say that I went a little step beyond what Zach said, so don't.
Right.
But
no, it's very, and Tom mentioned right in the chat something that I can't find right now, but something about the middle term being the definition, right?
Yeah, so the middle term in this case would be the thing itself or the substance, right? And the animal and horse, the fact that they belong together, why are they one thing? It's because of the substance which the cause defines.
No, I think that's overloading the idea, right? Because the middle term can be, how did the bricks, how are the bricks and the house related? Well, through the builder, right? But that is an accidental relationship. There's nothing about the builder that means having to work with these stones, and nothing about the builder that means that the builder has to be building a house, right? So the middle term that unites them can merely show up an accidental relationship between them.
Yeah, no, I'm not talking about that. That's
okay.
Not what so I'm talking about the substance being the middle term, which is not accidental to the thing itself. The substance is the thing itself. It is what makes it one. It is defined by the cause in terms of final cause, all those multiple aspects of how Aristotle conceives of cause. And so animal and horse are one thing because of the substance horse, or the substance that makes them one. And so the substance is the middle term between animal and horse.
Right.
Is
You know,
am I off base there, or is that close?
well, I think you're, go ahead, Peter.
This is, I think, jumping ahead to chapter, Ada, but their form is, it's like the being of work of the material that has a potency for it.
Mm.
And that's it's the actualization of the potentialities. And so it's, again, I don't know, is that getting closer to that, what Michael was talking about before we started recording, was the there's that instant, the beginning of an activity is this instant that isn't really part of it. It's not a continuing thing, but it's that sort of thing where it's like the actualization is this thing that just, and it reaches in and pulls out one of the potencies and does it or something. I mean, that's obviously a horrible way of talking about that, but it's the that actualization of
Right.
of a potency, but the matter carries the potencies around, and so I can't actualize me as like flying, because my material in some sense is not flyable. Doesn't have that potency. So that's not an actuality that I can have, but I can have an actuality of myself. I don't know. I think I'm lost. Never mind.
Yeah, because the only thing I want to say that makes me a little bit resistant to the thought experiment we've been thinking out loud is that, you know, form is, on the one hand, one of the two principles of the composite, right? Matter and form, but it's also the ground of the unity. It's what makes it one. But we can't think of it as Tyler said, you know, as some static qualitative determination in order to understand how the form can both be part and whole, right? Which is always the speculative leap, right? That the act is right. So so there's no third thing unifying these things. So the form is both the middle term and one of the extreme terms. Peter, I see your hand.
This is another footnote from Sachs in the next chapter, where he says the form itself has an internal form material structure and is therefore unified as intelligible material at work. The form itself has this structure. So
yeah, and that's how we, you know, kind of bridge the gap. I see perplexed faces. Does anybody want to just say something to tie a ribbon around it, or?
So there is one. If we look at, you know, the first paragraph, it says, "For perhaps from this we may also make clear that substance, whatever it is, that is separated from the perceptible substances."
Right.
So what we perceive, a musical animal or a horse, whatever, the substance is separated, distinct from it. That's why I kind of chose that line.
I see, but okay, I think that's good that you bring this up, because he says perhaps from looking at the substance of perceptible things again, we might make clear that substance that is separated from perceptible substances, right? So this whole thing is kind of an exercise in getting clear about substance so that we can intelligently inquire into whether, and if so, what kind are the substances that are separate or have independent existence beyond the perceptible substances.
Can I just read Sachs's translation, which I think is a little easier?
Cool.
From these discussions, there are, what is it? Oh, for perhaps from these discussions, there will also be clarity about that kind of thinghood that is separate from perceptible and independent things.
Right, that thinghood, right?
But the way he puts it, it pulled out that the thinghood that he's considering only one type of thinghood, that one that is separate from the perceptible independent things. Not that unnecessarily all substance would be.
Right, exactly. So,
But in that case, he's talking about a type of thinghood. It's almost like a genus, and he seems to be separating that from the individual. And I don't think, and I might be misunderstanding Aristotle, but if I'm not, that doesn't seem to be what Aristotle is saying, because he
Right.
wants to identify what is the individual, what is the thing. He's not separating out its genus or its type or its thinghood. He wants to get at it itself as an individual.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And we just have to remember that Sachs's translation of ousia is thinghood. So he doesn't use the word substance. He says thinghood. But so even though it sounds like an abstract noun, like a genus, when we read from the Sachs translation, we have to remember thinghood is just his translation of substance. And so,
Okay.
yeah. All right. So I don't have Charlie here today. Otherwise, I would have made the point at the end that at the end of 17, he makes the interesting point that contemporary, or that Thomistic hylozoism is false because composites are not, and it cannot, in fact, be elements of matter and form can't be elements of composites. But that's, so to speak, the line that this particular a more modern Aristotelianism takes. And anyway, but there's we do not have anybody with Thomistic training amongst us, I believe. So I'm going to leave that point for another day. All right. So let's move on. And
I got this book.
huh?
I have this book, which might have a Thomistic influence in it somewhere.
All right, book 8, pleasantly small, short. So, but not for that reason easy. So he gives us another summary. I think we're good on summaries right now. But I did want to read the second paragraph because he begins to introduce the language of potentially and actively. So this is the beginning of his fresh start. And if you remember book Zeta, he looked at matter, and he did distinguish matter, form, and composite. And he said, composites are not a problem. We'll leave them aside. We're just going to look at matter and form. And that's what we did all through book Zeta. And now he's come back in his fresh start. He's going to actually look at the composite. Okay. And so we read here, starting with now. Now, however, we should go through the agreed upon substances, not the ones that he agrees are substances, but what people generally think to be the ultimate being or the ultimate reality of things. Now, these are the perceptible ones. So everything's built on perceptible substances, is the assumption. And the perceptible substances all have matter. Now, the underlying subject is substance. And in one way, this is the matter. By matter, I mean what, though not actively a this something, is potentially a this something. In another way, it is the account and shape, which being a this something is separable in account. So in the definition, I don't have to mention the matter. And in a third way, what is composed of them, of which alone there is coming to be and passing away, only with the composites, and which is unconditionally separable. For of substances that are in accord with the account, some are separable and some are not. That last line irritates me. I just can't quite wrap my head around it. So just in case somebody gets what that last sentence is saying, help me out. And then I'll read the next paragraph. But just something about that pretzel logic going on here that I can't wrap my mind around. And if nobody has anything to offer, that's totally fine. I don't think it's essential, but I just, in case that made sense to you the first or second time through, I want to hear your thought. All right, fair enough. It's all good. Okay, I'm going to read the next paragraph here. It is clear, though, that matter too is substance. For in all changes from one opposite to another, there is something that underlies the changes. For example, in change of place, there is what is now here and later on there. In change in growth, there is what is now one size and later on larger or smaller. In change involving alteration, there is what is now healthy and then again sick. And similarly, in change in substance, there is what is now coming into being and later passing away. And now is underlying subject as a this something, and then again as being so as a lack. Hopefully that you remember that from the physics. The other sorts of changes follow along then with this sort, but this one does not follow along with either one or both of the others. For if a thing has matter for change of place, it is not necessary that it also have it for coming to be and passing away. What the difference is between unconditional coming to be and coming to be that is not unconditional has been stated in our works on nature. All right, so there's some sticky stuff there, not all of which I'm necessarily going to be able to clarify, but I'm always interested in hearing your thoughts. But let's go back to that first paragraph and just here's some thoughts about what we've understood matter to be heretofore. That's repeated in the second paragraph, right? Now gets understood as being potentially a this something as over against what's actively a this something. How do those things fit in your head together? What we've understood matter to be, and now this.
I'm gonna sort of just say something
Cool.
slightly, possibly oracular, but I think so. Matter seems to be only understandable as a kind of activity of substance.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not substance as such, but rather dependent on substance. It's a very specific self-relation of substance to itself. I think the development.
Can I just ask what I mean? Can you explain why you brought in the reflexivity here? Obviously, it's attractive, but it's not in the text. So, can you justify it from the text, or at least give me a perspective?
So, I think the development. So when you use potential here, right? We have something that has the potential to develop in some way or another.
Mm-hmm.
And if matter is what's responsible for its potential, we have to account for how the substance also has something like an end, which guides how matter changes in relation to it.
Mm. Okay.
If matter is the pile of potentialities, that sort of at least constrains what could be actual about it, right?
Right.
Right. And remember, matter's not a thing. I think everybody gets this, but I'm just gonna, it's not a thing, right? It's in a perceptible object or perceptible thing. It's that which, that aspect of it, that dimension of it that undergoes the change, that which persists through the losing and gaining of forms.
Matter too is a substance. That's what it says right at the very top there.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That's not, so
It
by,
doesn't say is a substance, it says is substance. I'm taking that not to mean they're equivalent, but that substance belongs, or I mean, matter belongs to substance is how I'm reading. I could be wrong, but that's how I understand it.
Okay.
well, matter is the thing that underlies because it has potential to be, has potential being hot and the potential to be cold.
Right.
And
Right.
the actualization is, well, now I'm hot. Now my new actualization is now I'm cold.
Mm-hmm.
That's only because I could pass, only because the matter
Mm-hmm.
had the potential for that.
Right.
But neither alone is substance. Right? Is that true?
Right.
Or no, that's not true because a couple places he says matter, the form is substance, matter is substance, and the composite is substance. Doesn't he say that?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. Yeah.
They're,
I mean,
they're
I
not
understand. I understand him to be saying that, you know, the agreed matter is an agreed upon substance. These are agreed upon substances. So he's not actually yet developing his theory.
This whole
He's-
paragraph is subjunctive. Got it.
Right. Nicely put.
I did throw a few quotes from later in the text in the chat that I said to ignore in the,
Oh.
but I think they do relate to this now that we get to it.
You know, Aristotle is going to bring us to the idea that the ultimate difference is, you know, the lowest form is simply, what makes it lowest is that it's identical with its matter. And so in the ultimate difference, matter and form are no longer distinguishable, right? And so there is a sense in which matter is substance, but he hasn't said that yet, right? And so I just wanted to put that out there as kind of a horizon towards which we're working, right? Proximate matter and ultimate difference are not two, but one. And so it's the matter is the form's matter, and the form is the matter's form, and or we think of it as structured matter, further division of which turns it into some other thing. And so, right. Okay, Tim, did you want to respond to that?
Well, I mean, later on, I think he talks about an eclipse. So the substance of an eclipse.
Right.
It doesn't have matter in any physical sense. And I don't know if he would say that an eclipse alters in any way, like it becomes whole and then it becomes partial. I'm not sure if he would say that, or if he just says once it just comes to be and then comes not to be, and there is no partiality to it. I don't know what he would say there, but there's no matter to the substance of an eclipse unless we say that its ability to change from whole to partial is material in the sense that it is that aspect of the eclipse that allows it to change, which in this case is not physical.
Right. And we want to banish any notion of contemporary physical matter from our minds.
Yeah.
Genus being an example of a non-physical matter.
Pardon me?
Genus is a
exactly
example of non-physical matter, unless I saw a genus scurrying under the rug the other day.
And so even then in the case of physical things, their matter is not physical either, correct?
Right.
So if you were to say the house is made of wood, wood is not the matter of the house. Wood is just the, I'm not sure what it is.
No. Wood is only matter insofar as it's the matter of the house, but it's not matter outside of that function.
It's not matter per se.
Right. There's no matter per se. There's nothing that just is matter.
In fact, he uses that house example. He says that the bricks and the wood and the whatever, that some people call it, that's when he's I think it's in the Democritus thing again, where he's saying that is the matter. But when the people who say things like, well, the house is for protecting you from the elements and stuff, they're talking more about the form. And then they talks about the composite, this house. That's coming up somewhere.
Right. Right. So there's one other thing maybe it's worth talking about. In the physics, matter is introduced as that which becomes something through the gaining and loss of form, or loss of a lack and gaining of a form. But we're in the metaphysics and we're investigating being. And so we can talk about matter in terms of changing or changeable objects. But there's also like mathematical objects and their matter, and they don't change. And so now we have a different concept of matter. And that concept of matter, and in the metaphysics, instead of the physics, is that which you get when you divide something or when you analyze something. Right. So I have a line, it's not matter, but when I divide it, I get 2 lines. Those are now the matter of that line. Right. So we have 2 ways of understanding matter, and it's good to keep those 2 clear, and they're both alien to our post-Cartesian understanding of matter. And that is, on the one hand, that which undergoes change and becomes something. So its context is becoming. And the other is that which results from division or analysis and is referred to sometimes as elements, sometimes as constituents, sometimes as parts.
Okay, so pure line has no matter, but a line that is decomposed into a series of points has matter.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. Okay, cool. So anything new in that second paragraph, right?
Can I just, another point of view, just.
Please, Mitra.
So, of course, the 2 things that he's talking about is matter and substance. And then there is this thing about a thing, which is a little confusing because matter, substance, I think the translator might have put it as a thing or potentially a thing.
I am.
Okay. So, but there is the 2 things, substance and matter. Now, what I think what he's saying is matter is what is more closer to what is perceptible, what is can be perceived, while substance is the principle of the matter that makes it perceptible.
Oh yeah, and so I liked your idea up until that last point. Substance is what makes it one, not what makes it perceptible. What makes it perceptible are organs of perception.
That's true. No, that's true. I agree. It's organs of perception, and of course, I kind of, I don't know if previously has talked about the observer and the observed. I'm sure there is an observer part of it, but let's forget about that. What I'm trying to say is, even the organs of perception, why I see this matter as one way and this matter as another way, is the principle of that or something underlying in that matter, that is the substance of it, that makes me distinguish between these 2 substances.
Right.
And therefore I'm not transposing, but I'm sharing not just the organ of perception's responsibility to perceive a matter, but the matter itself has a substance which is unique to it and which is the substance.
Agreed. So it's that which makes substance is that which makes something uniquely what it is, and therefore distinct from other things.
That's right. That's what I think. That's where it is coming from, I think.
Exactly. Okay.
But why is it one?
it is one for that, it is for that particular
Right.
observed relationship. That substance is one, and then there is another substance, right?
I mean, I think again, what makes it one is that there is no motion and therefore no temporal distinction, no becoming other. There is no becoming other that all motion is in exercising a potential or activating a potential. And it's the unique structure of capacity and activity that cannot be captured by motion, and therefore cannot be captured by something becoming other than itself, that that allows us to think the way in which something is one, not in virtue of participating in something in a Platonic heaven, to be polemical, right? But through itself. How can it be per se being, right? The holy grail of philosophy, per se being, non-relational. How is that possible? And Aristotle introduces activity and potency in order, and shows us in the simple manner that capacities and activities are part of our everyday life, to say that, you know, this deep metaphysical conundrum is solved by the deep metaphysical shape of something incredibly ordinary.
And going back to let's see, am I trying to understand this right? The reason that, so you need both the matter and the matter and the form.
Right.
Matter is the matter is the potentials, so it's a constrained area that it could move in. That's part of its identity, but not the whole thing, right? I can't be a flying thing, but I can be a walking thing, for instance.
Right.
That's my potential. I'm not walking now, I'm sitting, right? My actuality is sitting, that's my form right now, roughly. Well, that's kind of a cheap part of form, but anyway. But I guess walking Socrates and sitting Socrates were different. Anyway, but the thing that, since you need both of those things, it's that unity that's the composite, that's the someone, that's the highest thing, isn't that? I still want to go back to that. It's the composite that's the most, although he does say that it's the form, it's the actuality that's the most substancy, right?
Yeah.
But I keep wanting to say, but is that because does the unity come from the composite? Or is that just begging the question?
Does it come from the composite? No, the composite is a unity. And the question is what?
And I'm talking
why?
about the composite of form and matter, not any composite of parts of the matter, you know, like. But the composite of form and substance, or sorry, form and matter.
Well, let's read on and see if. To be, I'm not quite grokking the question. That's why I'm deflecting.
Well, can I chime in here?
Right, yeah, just because nothing is simply form and matter, but we think changeable things through the principle of form and the principle of matter, right? But there's more to them than just that. That's just how we get them into view as changeable things. And those are the composites we're talking about. They're composites of principle. I don't know if that helps, but that's my understanding at least. And that couldn't be wrong. Anyway, go ahead, Tim. And then Peter, if you have a thought to follow up on, please do.
Well, let me just throw this in here as a kind of retort to Peter, and that is, I mean, when we talk about the combination, the composite of form and matter, we're not talking about like the form is walking and then another form is sitting, and that I'm in the form of sitting now, but later on I will be in the form of walking, and therefore that shows that I have matter, or that I can, that matter is what allows me to change form, because it seems like that's not what he's talking about by form. Form would be more like human. Human is the form, and matter is what allows me to be human. in terms of I can walk, I can run, I can talk, I can sleep. That is the form of being human, but the form of that is the unity of who I am, of all of my potential, and actualization or activity is the one and only form human, which can also be like animal and two-footed and all that kind of stuff. But so we're not talking about sequential forms as being the unity over
No,
time,
the-
because then that wouldn't be a unity. That would be
The form, the form by itself is not the unity. What I was saying was it was the unity of the form and the matter. I go back to that example, the lintel and the threshold. That one piece of wood could be either the lintel or the threshold of the doorway, depending on whether you put it up above or down below, right?
yeah, but it's either or. It's not both.
No, but yeah, I might have, yeah, my example of sitting and standing may be a bad example, and it is a temporal example, but so I'm going to switch over to the lintel threshold one, and I still think my point holds in that case. That it's,
But would you agree that the form is human, and the matter is the potential and activity of the human form?
well, I'm maybe I'm objecting to the fact that the form, I'm actualized in one way right now. Well, yeah, if you think of myself as human, then I'm like this self-maintaining form thing. There's the activity of maintaining myself as me, right? That's my if I have one the form, that's it, right? It's the
Well, I
thing that
mean,
started
yeah.
when I developed and towards which I went during development, and then I maintain now until I die.
I mean, you could say that animal is one of your forms, human is one of your forms, Peter is one of your forms, you is one of your forms, but they're all the same. In a sense, they're all the same form. They're all a unity.
Well, the last one doesn't work.
But maybe I might say that sitting is not my form. Sitting is my one substance, and standing is maybe a different substance or something. Or that's more closer, right?
Ooh, where's the unity of that?
I don't know. I'm confused now. Only now am I confused.
All right, so
Finally.
let me see.
You can't be one of your forms, I think, is where
Yeah, I think part of the problem is that we're talking about like so when Aristotle says, you know, being pale is not the same as being human or something like that, right? Or being a pale human is not the same as being human. Right? He's talking about modes of being, not forms. And I feel like you guys are using form for different modes of being, the form. All right. And so maybe at least that was confusing me. So sitting is, you know, sitting Peter is like pale Socrates. It's a way of being, not only just being Peter, but a way of being human. But it's not a form of
Accidental.
Peter.
It's an accidental composite.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I'm not sure about that. But what I do want to say is that the form and the matter are principles for thinking something changing, or that can change. And this form we've seen also get specified as essence, as what it is to be that thing. And now the question is what is the relationship between what it is to be such a thing as Peter, and how is that related to the matter? Because it seems like we have to attribute to Peter's body or Peter's matter, or Peter's matter, the being of Peter. And that at first seems wrong. And so now we need to kind of work through this. But if we think about the different ways of being human as modes of being human, and that human is the form, and it's the form in all of those different modes, and we need a certain, we need a material substrate, in order to be able to actualize all those modes of being, right? Then the form remains one, and we're not all of a sudden a composite of all these many different forms, right? We're numerically one, but there's many beings associated with the numerically one Peter, right? Being
Okay, so-
pale, being an engineer, being in a building, being in the 21st century, many different beings, all related in this numerically one substance. And that
Right,
substance is form.
So that was actually my point. You said it maybe more succinctly than I did. When I said that human is his form, it really, Peter's form is Peter, right? It's who he is. And but I can predicate of Peter. Peter is human.
Yeah.
Peter is animal.
Right.
Peter is an engineer.
Right.
Well, I don't even know if that's who Peter is yet. Let's leave that one aside. But he is human. He is an animal. So in the sense that human and animal are predicates of Peter, then they are predicates of the form of who Peter is. And when I said you, maybe that's a bad way of saying it, but he, the indicator, as an indicator of Peter, I meant you in that sense, that it is who he is, you being who he is. So that's all I'm saying there.
But is predication a predication of the form, or is it predication of the underlying subject? That's something I'm still not quite. Something seems off about saying predicating something of the form.
Right. Right.
Well, of the substance, the form, what the substance.
Well, that's different. I mean, substance and the form are. I mean, that's the.
No, but the point is that when Peter's an engineer, you're predicating of the composite Peter is this matter form unity, and only that matter form unity is the engineer, not the form of Peter is an engineer, but the matter has nothing to do with it. It's kind of tricky with this language. All right. Let's move on and see if anything clarifying comes. All right, so H2. Sorry, eta. All right, since substance as underlying subject and as matter is generally agreed upon, and this is the one that is potentially, it remains to say what substance as activation and agaia of the perceptibles is. All right, I'm going to read this Democritus part, but unless you have something you really want to talk, I don't want to talk about it. But unless maybe it's interesting. Okay. Now Democritus, for his part, seems to think that there are three differentiae. For he thinks that the underlying body, differentiate would basically be forms. For he thinks that the underlying body and the matter are one and the same. Right? So that's kind of like Tim's physical matter, right? So corporeality, right? But corporeality isn't matter for Aristotle. For he thinks that the underlying body and the matter are one and the same, but is differentiated either by rhythm, that is shape, or by turning, that is position, or by contact, that is order. It is evident, okay, now here's Aristotle's point, that there are many differentiae, not three. Some things are said to be, for example, due to the mode of combination of their matter, like those said to be due to blending, such as honey, water, or due to tying, such as a bundle, or due to gluing, such as a book, or due to nailing, such as a box. Others due to more than one of these. Others are said to be due to position, for example, a threshold or a lintel. For these differ due to how they are placed. Others due to time, such as dinner and breakfast. Others due to place, such as the winds, and others due to the attributes special to perceptibles, such as hardness and softness, density and rarity, dryness and wetness. Some due to some of these, other due to all, and in general, some due to excess, some due to deficiency. So it is clear that something is said to be in many ways too, for a threshold is because it is placed thusly. Notice he doesn't mention the matter. And the being for a threshold signifies its being placed thusly. The being of it. Right, the function, the form. And the being for ice signifies its being solidified thusly. Not the water. And in some cases, their being will even be defined by all of these due to some parts being mixed, some blended, some bound, some solidified, and some making use of the other differentiate, as do hand and foot. All right, what do we have going there?
Now it's unclear to me whether this lintel thing is, so Democritus makes mistakes in the first paragraph, or he doesn't consider everything, and Aristotle points out a bunch of stuff that Democritus misses. If you're going to use Democritus' criteria, here's all these things he missed.
Right.
Now he goes down in the second paragraph, so it's clear, and he talks about the lintel again. But so the lintel isn't necessarily a bad example. It was missed by Democritus, and his analysis is not the correct analysis of it. But I guess there is an analysis of the difference between the being of the lintel and the being of the threshold. So it's not a bad example. Is that correct?
But prima facie, it seems right. I mean, we need to think about what it is that he's saying here, right?
Well, he's using that active form of being, right?
Right.
Threshold, the substance of the threshold is its, or maybe I'm misquoting that, but it's being placed in a, or it's not the action of the doer placing it, but it's
right.
It's the threshold's own being placed in that location relative to the house.
Right. What's interesting, he's partly taking up the categories here with position and time and place, right? And the categories are all ways of being, but the modes of combination or blending or something, those aren't employing the categories, but they are thinking about ways in which things are one, right? So all of these are ways in which things are the one thing, and we're getting their activation, right? Their, what substance as activation of the perceptibles are, right? And we're seeing that he thinks of the activation first as the differentia. Differentia is the energe. At first, it's always at first. And that's why, the wooden beam is not a lintel or a threshold because it's wooden, because it is in this position. And it's the position that allows us to say, or we say it's a lintel, not because it's wooden, but because it is here.
But is it wrong to consider the wood as matter that is then activated by its position, which turns it into this lintel or that threshold?
No, I think that's exactly right. That's right. Let me see. Kosman has a very, very nice little sentence about this. I'll just read it rather than sharing the screen. Okay, so we have the wooden beam, and we place it at the front of the house or above the door. And if we place it in front of the house, it's a threshold. Above the door, it's a lintel, right? And he says, when the wooden beam is just a wooden beam, it isn't matter. It becomes matter, right? It's no longer a wooden beam, it's a threshold.
When it's just this wooden beam, it's its own substance.
Well, yeah. But he says thresholds aren't substances, so we have to remember that.
No, not threshold. I said the wood, this
Oh, right,
2x4, whatever, I don't know, whatever, it's chunk of wood.
right.
If you consider that outside the context of the lintel threshold, it's just, yeah, you're right. It only becomes matter when you consider it as a building material or something like that.
That's right. It's right. It's only matter when it's
standing reserve.
yeah. Thanks, Heidegger.
Okay, so I
And so-
don't get that, because a wooden beam can be dry and then it can be wet. How can it change unless it has matter as a wooden beam?
Well,
As a wooden,
yeah, go ahead, Peter.
I was going to say that the analysis of it as a wooden being does not involve lintels or thresholds. It's its own little universe of analysis in some sense.
Right. No, I was taking that to be your point, Peter, and I agree
No,
with you.
yeah, right.
But this person that Michael is quoting seems to be saying the wooden beam doesn't have matter, but
No.
it does, but not relative to a threshold or a lintel. It doesn't.
No, but
No,
the
I
point
don't
is,
think
he says does not say it doesn't have matter.
Right.
It says it's not matter yet. Matter because the form of threshold is not actualized until I put it somewhere.
Okay, but it has matter. It has beam matter, but it doesn't have threshold matter.
Yeah, but that's a separate issue, right? But the matter of the wooden beam is not going to be the wooden beam, because the wooden beam is the form of the thing, right? The matter is going to be whatever it's made out of. Whatever the carbon or whatever, right? That's going to be something else. But the wooden beam itself is never matter.
Yeah, the matter of the lintel is
Oh,
not atom.
yeah. So it's never just matter per se. It's the matter of the threshold when it fulfills this function, when it's activated.
Matter is relational, not.
Yeah.
Well,
So, yeah.
I'm totally okay. So I totally get all that, but it is not matter, but as a beam, but a beam has matter.
Yes.
Matter, a beam has the potential of being wet. So
Right.
it has that matter. But not as a threshold, not the threshold matter, not the lintel matter.
Right.
It has only the matter of the beam, which is not wood, but it's the beam's potential to change.
Right.
Okay.
And still remain a beam, right? I mean, that's one of the
Right.
questions,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Mhm. Yeah, but I think we're all on the same page here with this relational notion, a purely relational and indeterminate understanding of matter. All right. And now we're starting to get a little bit of idea of the kind of form that Aristotle is talking about, right? The form that gives being, the being of threshold to the wooden beam, right, is being right here. Being right here, not there. There, it's not a lintel, sorry, or it's on threshold, right? So it has this something quality, right? The form makes it a this something, right? And that this is not a universal that it participates in, but a function that it is being.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, it seems to me this is the case where something comes into being when you take the beam and it is placed at the foot of the door. A threshold comes into being. A threshold comes. That threshold did not exist before, and so it comes into being with the placement of the beam into the wood. The beam is no longer, well, I don't know if I want to say what it is no longer, but what I will say is the threshold comes into being. So the beam itself did not have the potential of threshold in it, because it was the threshold came into being in its placement, not with respect to anything about the wood in itself, the beam in itself.
I'm not sure I understand your point in it, because I'm getting all hung up on this coming into being.
Well, I mean,
Because
this is
coming
what
into being is
this
like a
is.
process.
This
right?
is
So,
well, no, no,
so
no,
all
no,
that's
no,
happened
no,
when
no.
you placed it here is you've actualized a potency of that wooden being.
I only mean it in the terms that Aristotle, in the part we
Okay.
just read, meant or
Mhm.
said, where he said, let me see if I can find it. The other sorts, let's see, smaller in alteration. Now, and similarly in change in substance, there is what is now coming into being and later passing away. That's the sense I mean. So that's an H1. So coming into being and later passing away. So the threshold, as threshold, comes into be when the beam is placed, and it is placed as a threshold. That's when it comes into being. And if
Yeah.
you take that out and put it at the top of the door, the threshold passes away, and the lintel comes into being.
No, because no. I mean, look, Aristotle has not yet given us the reason to deny what you're saying, because he has not yet properly distinguished between, right, something coming to be and passing away, i.e. motion, and activation. Right now, what you're saying makes sense, but it actually is going to destroy the concept of energeia or activation if you think it that way. So I want to say is, I want you to put that in brackets and say, okay, maybe Aristotle is going to argue against this, but right now it's okay to say that.
Okay, so this use of being, I took the nuance of being placed as a threshold as activation.
I see. Yeah, right. But it
So
it continues
telling me
to be
that's
that
not
threshold. It's continues to be that threshold, right? And it continues to act as the threshold as long as it's in that place. All right. So it's still acting. It's still activated or activating or whatever, however you want to use that language, right? So, and what it does is it gains and loses form as it's if the wooden beam is put in the place of the lintel, it's lost the form of threshold, and therefore it's false to say it's being a threshold, and it's gained the form. It's now gained the form, i.e. the function of a lintel, right? And it didn't like as I moved it from down below in front of the door to the top of the door. But that is implied in the term coming to be. That's why I'm squirrely about it, right? It's not becoming less and less a threshold as I move it closer and closer to the lintel place, right?
Okay, so I will just point out that there is a parallel between all these other beams he has, like due to gluing, due to blending, due to nailing, and then for placement he says due to place, or due to how they are placed. In other words, due to the placing, due to the subject being placed as. So I'm seeing a parallel there for doing gluing, blending, and placing. So that's what I mean. I only mean it in that respect.
Right. And I just wanted to point out where that analogy breaks down.
Okay.
Because if I add honey to the water is becoming increasingly honeyfied, right? It's coming to be honey water, right? Which is to say have a certain flavor or something like that. So so there's always this process character, but there's no process character to activating a potency.
So there's no process factor to blending, gluing, or nailing in this paragraph either. But so I'm not attributing process to the activation.
Right.
I'm not attributing process either in those cases or in placement. But anyway, you'll have to convince me later. We can move on.
Okay, no, I appreciate it. No, I think this is very, very important that we make these two opposing understandings clear. so that the text can be the arbiter. Mitra, so I appreciate it, Tim. Thank you.
So I guess I'm just, it may not be what Aristotle is saying, but I'm trying, like you, I'm trying to understand too. So the second para, it actually says, so it is clear, the first line, so it is clear that something is said to be in that many ways too. So that is where the being to be is what it's referring to. So which means that, this is something that I am adding, which is not there in the text. I'm just thinking that if you look at all these examples that he has given, honey, water, threshold, lintel, all those things, this is what we have named in our language. That is, we found this to be something that is special. So
Specific,
what is specific, right? So what he's saying is, like, for instance, in honey water, you could have like 0 water and honey, that is honey, 0 honey, 100% water, that is water. And then you could have in the middle, you could have different things which you could name differently, and they come to be, they become beings. Okay, so if you take all the attributes, like whether shape, size, whether it's some particular position and all those things that he's talking about, then these are all differentiates. They are the different beings. And if you go to the cause of it, why is such a thing? If you look at it just like that and say, okay, here is something, and I look at it, and then I say, this is something, someone says this is some name for honey water, and you say, okay, why is this? And then you go investigate, then you'll find what is the substance or what is the cause of that being. So I think he's just trying in this, he's just trying to say that whatever you see, whatever comes into existence because of combinations of substance or matter, and we name them as something specific, that comes into being. That's kind of roughly what I thought. And then you look in the cause and you'll find substance and matter.
I just want to say that Aristotle acknowledges that there are far more beings than we have names for. And so the naming isn't important for whether something is a certain way or not. So I just want to add that, right, it kind of to help rethink that process you just gave, but see Peter's hand.
I just want to read a short paragraph from Aquinas.
Okay.
1698, in case anybody's following along.
A hoary authority.
So, for if one wishes to define a threshold, he shall say that it is a piece of stone or wood placed in such and such a position. And in this definition, stone or wood is as matter and position as form. So he's talking about the definition there. Similarly, in the definition of a house, stones and timbers are as the matter and being combined in such a way as form. And similarly, in the definition of ice, water is as matter and being frozen is as form. So too in the definition of a harmony in the high and low notes, same thing applies in all the other definitions. So with the mixing and all that other stuff. He draws 2 additional conclusions. First, there are different actualities or forms for different matters. Or in some things, the actuality consists in being combined, in others being mixed, and some in the other foresaid mentions. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Well, can you elucidate on how it would be helpful? Like,
well, he's bringing up that it's the context, like the definition. Wood is matter only in the context of it being a lintel.
Mhm.
or being a
Why
threshold.
is that? I mean, because wood starts out as a tree, but you can
no.
make a beam. You can make a
Mhm.
beam out of wood, right?
Wood is
why can't
matter only in the terms of a definition.
Mm.
Wood is not matter just per se, sitting off.
Okay, so a beam you would say is the definition, and wood is the matter of the definition, or i.e. wood is serving as the potentiality for change in
think
the
that-
beam.
Wood, whose dimension is 2 inches by 4 inches or whatever, like a 2x4, that is the being of, then wood is the matter of a 2x4.
Right,
Mhm.
gotcha. Okay, gotcha.
But wood per se isn't matter, a matter.
Right.
I don't think.
And
Maybe
that's
I'm
not contrary to, I don't know if that's supposedly clearing up my point, because my point is perfectly consistent with that. So.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. Let's see here. Okay, so on 8.2, I have main points are the substance's activation of perceptuals is first, a threshold is a threshold because it is placed in such a way, and the matter is indifferent as long as it's something that can be placed in such a way. A lintel is because it is placed in such a way, right? And the difference is not a different places in homogeneous space, but functional difference in a qualified space. I went a little bit off the rails there. That's not, but I just want to, place is not, it's the place of the house. It's the layout of the house that determines the space. And so that makes the placement of the stones or wood capable of being thresholds or lintels. All right, so next he goes to the question of defining the house. Okay, so that's page 136. Right, so just to make a little more progress here. Okay, so first he says we need to look at these differentiae, right? Because it seems like that is where the activation is. And that stands, but then he says, now none of these differentiae is substance, not even when it's coupled with matter. Nonetheless, it is in each case the analogous thing to it. This is always a very irritating move in Aristotle. I never quite know what to make of it, but let's just acknowledge that it's here, right? Just as, okay, here's the analogy. Just as in substances, what is predicated of the matter is the activation itself. In substances only. Things that aren't substance, just accidental combinations, it's not the activation that's predicated of the matter. And we have to always distinguish between any old thing and substances. So in the other definitions too, it is what is most of all this, namely the activation. For example, if we had to define a threshold, we would say wood or stone placed this way, and a house, bricks and timbers placed this way. This way, that's where the whole being and activation is, not in the thing that's being this way, but the way it's being. Peter.
Sorry, that just reminded me of a distinction that Halper made, that that the substance is not something that brings what it is to the thing. It's something that brings the unity to the thing.
Right.
Anyway, just I don't
right. know. Right. So we can understand. I mean, mode of being is going to be a very common expression in the history of philosophy, and here we're kind of getting it at its birthplace. Right? And so modes of being are not just like properties, but ways of being something, right? Placed this way. Being placed this way is not itself a thing, right? And so what we're doing is we're kind of trying to lose our thing orientation and get to being orientation. And in that sense, things aren't beings. Things are unities of being. Right? Okay. Just wanted to point that out.
What is that in the text or unities? I was sort of closing my eyes closed.
Oh,
Or is that you? You
kind of
said,
later on, but I'm just, I was extemporizing.
Okay, so yeah, but unities of being.
Mhm.
Yeah, the thing. Yeah, that's the unity thing. Part, yeah,
Right. And that's, you know, what makes it numerically one, but but being is said in many ways of it. It is pale, it is big, it is in Athens, right?
And these plethora of parts that materialists get hung up on are only elements of something of the matter, which don't really count for the substance as being part.
Exactly. We lose the thing in the analysis, right? Mhm.
Well, can I get clarification? Like a mode is not a predication of an attribute, right? So this is pale is not a mode, right?
Right.
So it's the being. This is like steel. Like steel is its mode.
Mhm.
Wood
Being
is
at the top, being at the bottom.
Right. So being pale, right, is a way of being, but I predicate pale of Socrates, right? And if that's true, then Socrates being pale is a mode of being of Socrates.
So that's
are
pale
you
taken in
saying
two different
that
ways.
What's that?
an attribution is a mode then?
No, I want to, there's two different things. Pale can be when I predicate pale of somebody, you're pale. That's a pale as a predicate or as a quality.
Right.
When I say you're being pale,
Mm-hmm.
that's a different sort of thing than a predication.
That's right. It's I'm not predicating pale of you. I'm saying that I'm indicating a mode of your being.
So if you say Socrates is pale,
Uh-huh.
then are you predicating or are you?
Yes.
And that is a mode of being. A predication is a mode of being.
That's what I was trying to say. It isn't. Right. Having an attribute, right? Let me put it this way. I can predicate of you that you are 300,000 miles away from the moon, but you have no way of being actively 300,000 miles away from the moon, right? So an attribute is not automatically a mode of being, right? We have to know what it is to be Tim to know what the kinds of modes of being are that are appropriate to Tim, and that will give us, this human here.
Okay, so there's a distinction, and the distinction only comes down to what the thing is rather than its properties, and that I get. But
Right.
I thought I heard you saying that, predicating a property is a mode of being. But obviously, I misinterpreted that. So okay. I'll leave it at that because kind of where I am right now is not confused.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Other than
Stay
how
there as
I
long
might
as you
have
can.
misinterpreted you.
In that mode of being for a while.
That is okay. Okay, so but I just
warning.
So I just want to reiterate, right? If we had to define a threshold, we would say wood or stone placed this way, right? And a house, bricks and timbers placed this way. And if ice, water, frozen or solidified this way, right? That's where this thisness is coming from. How to be a todeti, right? It's being this way that gives it its specificity. And the same way in the other cases. It is evident then from these things that the activation of one matter is different from that of another, and so is the account. For of some things, it is the mode of combination, of others, the mixing, and of others, some other of the things we mentioned. That is why of those who give definitions, the ones who in saying what a house is say that it is stone, bricks, and timbers are speaking of what is potentially a house, since these
matter.
are matter. All right. Those, on the other hand, who propose it as a receptacle to shelter property and bodies, or something else of that sort, are speaking of the activation, the activity of the house.
The form.
Yes. But those who combine both of these speak of the third sort of substance, the one composed of them. For it seems that the account, number 2, that is given in terms of the differentiae, right, receptacle to shelter, is of the forms and the activation, while the one that is composed of the constituents is an account of the matter instead. We have the differentiae versus the components.
Differentiates the form. The
Yes,
genus is the
exactly.
matter.
What,
So I was
what's the
thinking
matter? Right. I mean, constituents here would be the timber and bricks and stone.
Right, but every time, yeah, but in the genus
Right.
differentia thing, that's a minute thing. So that's my hobby horse I'm writing now today.
Right. And this is important to him. I don't later, matter, bricks, the matter, brick, stone, and timber, placed together in this way. This way is not separate from the house. And so it's not an exterior form or something imposing unity from the outside, but its way of being, the mode of combination, is the unity and doesn't give the unity. And that's what makes it the cause of unity, because it is the unity.
If you
It
think
is-
the form is being placed outside, you're thinking platonically in a sense.
Exactly,
The form is external.
exactly.
This house is formed, is this brick's formed this way.
Right.
The duplicate house that the guy doing the subdivision did, it looks exactly the same model number.
Mhm.
That's a different form in a sense.
Mhm. All right.
Yes, it's type.
Yeah, go ahead. No, think
Well-
aloud. It's good.
Well, I was going to say, he does say at the top of 112, I guess it is, we must then get a hold of the genus of the differentiae, for these are going to be starting points of the being. So starting points I was taking to be the matter in the previous, when he said starting point at the beginning of our reading before, I was taking it to be the matter. And then the form is what distinguished the substance. The form, the composite of the starting points and the form were the composite that it was essentially the substance. But here the differentiae seems to be something different as I hear you explain it. For example, the ones differentiated by the more or less, or the dense or rare, or by others of this sort, by the more or less, by the dense or rare, those seems like properties to me.
But remember, things sound like properties taken one way and they sound like modes taken the other, some things, right?
So for all these are kinds of excess and deficiency, and if something is differentiated by shape or by smoothness or roughness, all of these are differentiated by kinds of straight and curved, kinds of straight and curved.
Can you scroll this text up to where we're?
Sorry.
Okay.
I was looking at my own text, not worrying about you guys.
For these cases, then, it is evident if indeed its substance is the cause of each one's being, and that it is in these differentiae that we must look for what the cause is of the being of each of them.
Right. So he mentioned that these are the kinds of differentiae that are relevant to perception. Right. And so, right. So if something is more or less yellow, it is more or less gaseous. This kind of thing is what he's first of all talking about as differentia, right? What makes one thing distinct from another thing.
But why aren't those properties though? That's where I'm getting hung up here.
Well, I think that there's that inherent ambiguity that you can, in one way, think of some of these things as properties. You know, the lintel is above the doorway. That you're talking about maybe you're talking about its property, you're not talking about its substance.
Yeah, but that's a weird phrase, right? Because the lintel is above the doorway, right? You're attributing above the
redundant.
doorway to something that's already above the doorway, right? And so what
Well,
you're
that's
basically saying,
okay.
what you're basically saying is the lintel is the lintel, and now accidentally we've collapsed into talking about nothing.
The lintel's at the top of the.
We're saying
yeah,
nothing.
Yeah. Anyway,
So he's not saying that when looked at a certain way, properties differentiate substances.
Right.
Because properties are accidental. So when you say, Peter, in one way we can look at them as properties, but in another way they're not properties, or they're modes of being or something, or they're just differentiae. I mean, differentiae I take to be what differentiates substances. So the differentiae would have to be at least modes of the substance or of modes of the essence. And they can't be properties, so that how could the modes of an essence be properties when looked at in one way?
well,
Or be accidental when looked in one way, because they can't be accidental, right?
so reading that last sentence, from these cases, or these cases being like placed above or placed below or mixed or cold, you know, icy, right? From these cases, then it is evident if indeed its substance is the cause of each one's being. That is, in these differentia, being above, being below, being cold, being mixed, that we must look for what the cause is of the being of each one of them.
Okay. So I sort of get that. The differentiae in the case of the threshold is that it's not the lintel because it's placed because of its placement. So that is the differentiae. That's the mode that we're talking about. It's being placed at the foot of the door.
Well, for threshold, but
Or
Yeah.
for the cause. Yeah, okay. So I don't get why he says, more or less and dense and rare.
He
Those
doesn't do
are
very much. He
other-
doesn't do very much with those things, right? So
No, but-
I'm not going to get too hung up on them. But Peter, if
Those-
somebody has an answer, that's cool.
those are just more ways. We've just been talking about above and below. You can talk about mixed, the honey and water mixed together is a mode of being of those things, which makes it this, what do you call it? Honey milk or whatever it is. Whatever they call it.
Honey water, yeah.
That's like, it's a differentiate, just like above and below, mixed or unmixed, dense or less dense. Like the water is less dense than the ice, or actually ice is less dense than water, but whatever.
Okay,
But, I mean,
so
oh, go ahead, Tim, please.
well, I was just gonna say dense and rare. You might think of water, like you say, steam would be rare.
Yeah.
Water would be dense, or ice, and so there are different purposes, causes of that. So I get that. Okay, so you have to be very judicious in how you mean these terms, but yeah, I get it now.
Okay. I mean, the main point, at least that I wanted to get it, and is how he's thinking about activation or activity, right? In all of these different examples, and it's not an accident that he talks about artifacts first, because this house is built this way from stones, but it doesn't have to be these stones. It can be those stones, or it doesn't have to be stones. It can be wood, right? There is an absolute independence between not between matter in general, but this matter and this thing, this house, this way of combining doesn't need to have these stones. Other ones would do, right? And so we have an accidental connection in any artifact because other matter would do. And what he's leading us to is with substance, not any matter will do. Only that matter can perform those functions to make, to be the capacities to be this kind of being. So, right, you cannot be human any other way than to have 5 senses and to walk upright and to be rational.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to take off. It's already 10 after.
Oh yeah, okay. Fair
So,
enough.
Sorry.
Dang. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, we should probably wind it up.
I won't
But,
mention two-hand and height and four-hand and height. But anyway,
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, there you go. All right, take care. Good seeing you.
all right.
Thank
See you,
you,
Peter.
thank you, guys.
All right.
Thanks. Bye.
Yeah, so thanks very much, everybody. We never get through the whole text I assign. I don't know why. Okay, but I mean, just as for clarity's sake, I'm going to give everybody a break from Aristotle after the next meeting. So the next meeting, we're going to do as much as we can about activation and understand as much about activation and agaya as possible by reading book 9 for next time. And then we're going to take a break. And then when we resume, we're going to read a little, some of book 12, which is the so-called theology, right? And then we're going to move on from Aristotle because, you know, Aristotle is like this, he's unearthing all of these amazing archaeological finds, right? He's making these amazing distinctions, but he's not doing very much with them, right? He's not showing how to think with them, but rather how to think them. And what's going to happen in history is people are going to try to think them and to think with them. And so they get more contour and more specificity. So that's going to be kind of exciting and to actually get out of this amorphous territory that we've been in now for a year and a half. And you've had amazing patience with the whole thing, and it will bear fruit, I think, above and beyond just witnessing a master at work, is to see what it means to think with them and not just to think them. Yeah, so in the fall we'll do this whole activity thing. We're going to try to understand, especially since in history it was frequently understood, right? The being that is act or activity, right? Requires a being that is pure act, and that's going to be what he calls the unmoved mover. And so we want to understand that connection and then see what people, later thinkers, do with it, you know, whether they dismiss it or whether they alter it or whether they reformulate it in a way that makes it stronger or weaker or whatever. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking for as we see these ideas unfold, get lost, be rediscovered, be reconnected in late antiquity. Yeah, anyway, that's the plan. So next time, book Theta and get as much out of it about activity and potentiality as we can. It is actually an easier book to read than what we've been going through. Zeta and Eta are super, super hard. Theta is actually much easier. Right, so next time we'll meet, and that will be our last one before the summer break, and then we'll reconvene in September. All right. Any questions?
Awesome. Thank you, and thanks for that link to that lecture.
Oh yeah,
that was really nice. I liked his voice. I liked his presentation style, and I liked his take on Aristotle. That curious boy and man who was just walking around. Hey, I wonder how that is. Kind of reminded me like a very curious Tom Sawyer, you know, kind of guy.
Exactly. That was so old world when because his expression was, you know, Aristotle walks around and sees something and says, hello. What's this all about?
Yeah, that was a nice way to think of him.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll post the other Aristotle lectures on the meetup for next time, so you have access to them. And I haven't
Awesome.
listened to all of them. I think Kosman is a wonderful thinker in his own right and a very subtle and beautiful interpreter of Aristotle. So I don't really know anyone better. Yeah, sharing in that, I think, is sharing in Aristotle's richness, because we've been dealing with some very arid things. And
Yeah, thanks for doing that, because I was going to go to try to find that whole series because I like that one so much.
Right.
So yeah, appreciate it.
oh, that's good. I'm so glad it spoke to you. It spoke so much to me too. All right, y'all, thanks for participating. I hope one or two things are slightly clearer than they were before, and I look forward to seeing everybody on the 15th, 2 weeks from today. Ciao, ciao,
Great,
bye-bye.
thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.